In our previous video, we saw that Kierkegaard is the author of Fear and Trembling, but we're using the pseudonym Johannes de Silento and just Johannes to refer to the author. We also saw that Johannes accepts the story of Genesis 22, where Abraham's asked to go sacrifice his son Isaac and asked by God to do it, and Abraham sets out to do it, essentially going to result in the killing of Isaac, and some might even say the murder of Isaac. And there's problems there. What morally okay person would do this? Johannes has a lot of work to do, and some of that is attempted. He tries to solve some of these problems with a section that's called "Is there a teleological suspension of the ethical?" And then on the bottom here I have outlined the argument, or as I understand the argument of that section. So I'm going to try to unpack that, starting with the question, right? So let's admit, if this question is really difficult to understand, what is a teleological suspension of the ethical? And I think we can start to understand the question for setting aside the word teleological and realize what Johannes is trying to do. And he's asking this question: did Abraham do something unethical? And what is it to do something unethical? Johannes here is taking the target not necessarily in the philosophical sense, what is ethics, but what we might understand as ethics. And here scholars debate whether he's thinking of ethics according to Hegel or Kant, or maybe Hegel through Kant. And while I think those are interesting questions, those are also very scholarly, deep into the text kinds of questions. I think the main point for any reader is that Johannes is thinking of ethics as the sort of rules of morality that somebody could arrive at by logical reasoning, or by the natural light of reasoning alone. And whether that's some sort of Hegel system or Kantian system is an interesting related question, but not necessarily changing what this core idea is. Again, ethics is just something that you might arrive at in some sort of rational way. That said, I'm going to give you the very first and key premise, and it's that if ethics is the highest standard, then Abraham is a murderer or a tragic hero. Now, before I explain why he believes that, I need to kind of explain what tragic hero is. I'm going to make a quick little drawing, and hopefully that helps out. All right, here's the deal. You're standing here with a gun, and on the other side is a terrorist holding a loved one of yours who's going to press this button. And by pressing this button, will blow up the whole country. Now, there isn't any time. It's going to take just a few seconds, and this whole country's gone. You can stop the terrorist with only one option. You have one option. You shoot through your loved one, essentially killing your loved one or sacrificing your loved one, and stopping the terrorist and saving the country. Alternatively, you could just not shoot. You put the gun down, the terrorist presses the button, you keep your loved one. What do you do? Now, I'm not going to want to talk about the ethics of it, but what I do want to say is that if you chose to shoot, you would end up being what Johannes calls a tragic hero. It's obvious why. It's tragic because you lose your loved one, and you're a hero because you saved the world. Now, in essence, you are taking a life, but the thought is you are in some sense, your actions are in some sense justifiable, or at least understandable to anyone who would ask you, why did you do it? Did you have a good reason? Now, you might disagree as to which thing you should do. That doesn't really matter. I think we could all agree that the person who decides to be the tragic hero in some sense can explain and reason with others as to why they did what they did. Anyways, back to premise one, which Johannes says, okay, look, assume that ethics is the highest standard. Now think about what Abraham does. Okay, either you might think he's a murderer, or there might be some sort of tragic hero element. But he's going to say it's not the case that Abraham's a tragic hero. And why is that? Well, there isn't anything that Abraham can say to someone that will be understandable or intelligible or even more strongly, justifiable. If you were to stop Abraham and say, wait, what are you doing on his way to sacrifice Isaac? Abraham wouldn't really be able to justify himself, in at least not in your eyes. I wouldn't. It wouldn't make sense to me. Okay, next, Johannes says, well, Abraham is not a murderer, and one of the key reasons to believe this is the acceptance of the biblical account. So this is really an argument for people who have already accepted the authority of the Bible. Okay, some people find this kind of suspicious as an argument, and again, the point is that this is an argument for a Christian Europe, a Christian readership. Okay, so the conclusion he draws from this is that ethics is not the highest standard, and I take this to be synonymous with our original question. There is a teleological suspension of the ethical. Okay, hopefully with these brief comments, you're able to go back to the section with, it's over here, with this title, and kind of see how the various different parts can be understood in terms of this framework, and hopefully that helps you out in reading Johannes.